That I really don't know. There are a lot of problems and difficulties. Inevitably, it's an awkward situation to be in. Does any one other person really like them?
Behind the sealed walls of Windsor, a quiet secret waited decades to be revealed, and when it surfaced, it left the entire monarchy reeling. Why did Prince Philip choose Catherine over Camilla in his final wish? Let's open the will that shook the palace. For years, the whispers had floated through the corridors of Buckingham Palace like an unseen breeze. Rumors of hidden instructions in Prince Philip's private will, quietly drafted in his later years, sealed away from prying eyes as tradition demanded. Since 1910, royal wills have been locked from public scrutiny, preserved to protect the dignity of the departed and shield the family from unnecessary scandal. Yet even in such silence, whispers are never truly silenced. Trusted aides who handled the delicate parchment spoke of its surprising contents in hushed tones, knowing they held in their hands a secret that could tilt the balance of royal favor. When that final wish was revealed to a select few after Philip's passing, it wasn't Queen Camilla's name they found written next to the cherished title she had long believed was hers. Instead, it was Catherine, Princess of Wales, whose name stood there in quiet defiance of expectation, written not in the ink of favoritism but of foresight and trust. Those who read the will felt the weight of its meaning instantly. Camilla, who had spent decades carving her own place in the royal family, who had already been ceremoniously handed the role by Philip himself years before, was bypassed in his final testament. The words struck like a silent thunderclap, leaving those present stunned at the audacity, the symbolism, the quiet judgment implied. This wasn't merely about a ceremonial position. It wasn't simply about honor or duty, it was about legacy. The decision ignited a bitter disquiet, because Camilla had once stood proudly beside Philip in uniform, taking over his cherished military role in a formal ceremony, confident it was hers to keep. And yet, in his final hour, he had written her out. The question now burned hotter than ever. Why had Philip chosen Catherine? Why her and why not the woman who stood closest to him in that particular chapter of his life? Some claimed it was Catherine's unwavering composure under pressure. Others whispered that Philip, ever the strategist, believed only Catherine embodied the quiet grace and modern vision needed to lead a monarchy into an uncertain future. Still, others muttered that Camilla's turbulent history with the family had left its scars impossible to fully erase. The palace remained tight-lipped, but the decision spoke volumes on its own, reverberating beyond gilded gates and into the public imagination. What did Philip see in Catherine that he did not in Camilla? What future did he envision when he put his trust into the hands of the younger woman? With these questions echoing through the family, the court, and the nation, one truth became clear. This choice wasn't made lightly. It was deliberate, thoughtful, and perhaps it was his final lesson to the family he had served for nearly a century. To understand this bold choice, we must first understand the man who made it a prince, who valued duty above all. While the cameras always captured him a step behind the queen, those who truly knew him understood he was the quiet strength, steering the monarchy through its storms. Prince Philip moved through royal life with a presence that was easy to underestimate, yet impossible to ignore. He was the man who held the line when the winds of change howled hardest, who steadied the ship when scandal or sorrow threatened to sink it. To the world he was consort, husband, prince. But behind palace doors, he was so much more the queen's confidant, the family's compass, and the monarchy's sharpest mind in its most delicate moments. When tempers flared or silence weighed too heavy over dinner, Philip was often the one to pierce it with wit so dry and unexpected it could make even the most solemn of courtiers crack a smile. He had an uncanny gift for diffusing tension with humor, sometimes a little too pointed, sometimes charmingly self-deprecating, but always effective. He understood that even royalty could suffocate under the weight of its own grandeur, and so he made it his mission to remind them, with a laugh and a sly remark, that they were human first and sovereign second. Yet, beneath the humor and charm, there lived a man deeply committed to preserving the traditions he inherited, but never at the expense of progress. Philip believed that monarchy was not static, and he insisted that its survival depended on its ability to evolve. "The world changes, and so must we," he once declared to a young royal, his words not a suggestion but a commandment. And it was a principle he himself lived by. He pushed for modernization at every level, from opening up royal finances to embracing television as a tool to humanize the crown. But perhaps his greatest contribution to that balance of tradition and change came not in speeches or ceremonies, but in his relentless investment in the young. Founding the Duke of Edinburgh Award was more than a philanthropic gesture. It was a mission. Through it, he invited generations of boys and girls to discover their strength, test their limits, and learn what it meant to lead with integrity. The award became a quiet revolution, shaping lives and reminding the world that the monarchy's value was not just in its pomp, but in the impact it could have on real people. Within the family, his counsel was sought far more often than the public ever knew. The Queen trusted his judgment implicitly, even when it clashed with her own instincts. His children, and later his grandchildren, leaned on his advice, sometimes bracing against his sharp opinions, but always finding clarity in his unflinching perspective. He was not just a figurehead at her side, but the steadfast guide who steered his family and the institution through crises, both seen and unseen. And among those he quietly observed and admired was a young woman who reminded him of the values he cherished most. Long before the world noticed her steady grace, Prince Philip had already seen it and decided she was the future of his legacy. From the moment Catherine stepped into the royal family, Philip's sharp eyes followed her with quiet interest, measuring her not by the pomp and ceremony around her, but by the way she carried herself through it all. He saw something in her that many overlooked in those early days, a quiet strength, a rare blend of kindness and resolve that reminded him of the monarchy's best ideals. He had watched countless people walk through the palace gates over the decades, some dazzling, some clever, some hungry for attention. But Catherine was different. She moved softly through the grandeur, offering her hand to strangers as if they were old friends, meeting the eyes of palace staff with the same warmth she gave to heads of state. It was not a performance, it was who she was. Her humility, her instinct to listen before she spoke, her ability to connect with anyone, these traits stood out to a man who valued sincerity over spectacle. It was that authenticity, Philip believed, that made her truly royal in spirit. He'd seen how easily fame could intoxicate, how the spotlight could twist even the noblest intentions. Yet Catherine never chased it. Even as the cameras followed her relentlessly, even as the world clamored to know every detail of her life, she never allowed the noise to shape her. She stayed anchored, content to let her actions speak louder than her presence. It was this quiet resistance to the lure of recognition that impressed Philip most, and it reminded him of the Queen herself in her younger days, standing firm against storms with dignity that spoke volumes. On more than one occasion, he mentioned her in passing to trusted friends, his words laced with an unmistakable note of respect. "She has the heart for it," he once whispered, a rare confession from a man known for guarding his thoughts like state secrets. To him, Catherine embodied the balance the monarchy desperately needed. Graceful yet strong, respectful of tradition yet unafraid to step into the modern world. In her, he saw someone who understood that the crown was not a prize to wear, but a burden to carry with grace. And so, as he neared the end of his life, the decision became clear to him. The role he envisioned, the legacy he wished to entrust, required someone who could lead without needing to be seen, who could command respect without demanding it. And in Catherine, he found that rare soul. He watched her grow from a nervous bride into a quiet force within the family, steady and unshakable, a reminder of everything he believed the monarchy should stand for. But what exactly did he leave her? And why did this role hold such weight within the royal family? Tucked among the royal traditions lies a title both sacred and powerful, and now it belonged to Catherine. In a family where every name, every role, every ribbon pinned to a uniform carries the weight of history, this particular appointment stunned even those who thought they had seen it all. The title of Colonel-in-Chief of the Rifles was not merely ceremonial. It was a bond forged over decades, an honor that demanded both reverence and strength. To the late Prince Philip, it was far more than just another piece of royal pageantry. It was a cornerstone of his identity, a living link to his own journey through service and sacrifice. The history of this title runs deep, steeped in stories of loyalty, courage, and unbroken dedication. Since its earliest days, the position symbolized a sacred contract between monarch and regiment, a promise that their bravery would never go unseen and that their sacrifices would always be remembered. And to Philip, who had lived through the chaos of war, who had commanded a naval vessel under fire, who had felt firsthand the burden of duty. This role was intensely personal. It wasn't just another responsibility handed down to him. It was something he wore proudly, a testament to everything he believed about honor and service. For years, he carried it with dignity, showing up for ceremonies not because he had to, but because he wanted the men and women under that banner to know that they mattered. He understood the weight of tradition and respected it, but he also brought his own quiet humanity to the role, mingling with soldiers as equals, laughing with them in private, comforting them in grief. His presence reminded them that behind the grandeur of the palace stood a man who truly understood what it meant to wear a uniform. And so, when whispers of the will began to spread, whispers that Catherine's name now replaced Camilla's as his successor in this cherished position, the quiet shock was impossible to ignore. Camilla, after all, had already stood in Philip's place during his lifetime, wearing the title with grace and pride. She had been there during his final ceremonial handover, accepting the honor from his own hands as if it were settled forever. The world believed it was hers, and so did she. But Philip's private decision revealed a more complex truth. In his eyes, the role deserved not just respect for the past, but also vision for the future. Someone who embodied both the grit of the regiment and the grace of a modern monarchy. Catherine, in her quiet strength, her unwavering composure, her instinct to lead without overshadowing others, had shown him that she carried the qualities he cherished most. It was not a rejection of Camilla, but a recognition of something unique in Catherine, a belief that she could preserve the soul of the role while guiding it forward into a changing world. The weight of that choice settled like a hush over the palace. Behind closed doors, speculation brewed. Why her? Why now? But Philip's decision spoke louder than any explanation. He had chosen Catherine because he saw in her what others could not, a woman worthy of both tradition and responsibility. But to truly understand the weight of this decision, we must step into Catherine's shoes and see the journey that prepared her for it. Before she graced palace halls, she was just Kate, but her quiet strength and kind heart were already shaping her destiny. Long before she bore titles or walked under the weight of royal tradition, Catherine grew up in a modest home where love was abundant and ambition was tempered by humility. Born into a middle-class family in the English countryside, she learned early that dignity wasn't something bestowed by birthright, it was something earned through how you treated others. Her parents, Michael and Carole Middleton, built their family life on simple but powerful values: respect, kindness, and a tireless work ethic. Those values, deeply rooted in her, would one day help her navigate the glare of the world's most relentless spotlight. At school, Catherine thrived quietly. She was intelligent, competitive, and unafraid to push herself beyond what was expected. She poured herself into sports, captaining her hockey team and running cross-country with determination that often left her peers struggling to keep up. And yet, no matter how fiercely she competed, she remained gracious, always lifting others with her. It was during these formative years that she earned her Gold Duke of Edinburgh Award, a significant and, perhaps, foreshadowing achievement. Even then, she was unknowingly walking a path that Prince Philip himself had designed, proving to the world and to him that she possessed the stamina and resolve the monarchy needed to endure. But her education was only the beginning. After completing her studies, Catherine embarked on a gap year that would quietly fortify her character even further. She ventured far beyond England's green hills to Italy, where she studied art, to Chile, where she volunteered in remote communities, and even to Southampton, where she worked at a port, experiencing the pulse of everyday life outside privilege. These adventures shaped her perspective, teaching her resilience and empathy. They stripped away any illusions of grandeur and left her with something infinitely more valuable, an unshakable sense of self. It was during her university years at St. Andrews, though, that her life took the most unexpected turn. In the quiet corridors of that ancient Scottish school, her path crossed with a young prince who carried the weight of a nation's expectations on his shoulders. Their friendship began gently, without the urgency of cameras or gossip columns. Over time, trust blossomed into affection, and affection into love. Together, they built a steady romance, immune to the frenzied speculation that swirled around them. In each other, they found not just a partner, but an ally, someone who understood the sacrifices their future would demand. When Catherine finally stepped into the royal circle, she did so without faltering. Where others might have stumbled under the suffocating scrutiny, she glided forward with quiet poise. Her transition into royal life was not defined by grand gestures or dramatic reinventions, but by her unwavering commitment to duty. She carried herself with dignity and grace, earning admiration not just from the public but from within the palace walls. Her calm resilience became her signature, a testament to the inner strength she'd been cultivating her entire life. But even as she embraced her royal duties, a storm quietly brewed behind palace walls, and at its center stood Queen Camilla. For Camilla, the title wasn't just an honor, it was a bond she thought unbreakable. Until it wasn't. In the intricate tapestry of royal traditions, few roles carried the personal weight and dignity of being Colonel-in-Chief of the Rifles. For Camilla, it was more than ceremonial. It became a quiet affirmation of her place within the monarchy, something she had earned through years of quiet perseverance. That bond had been forged in trust when Prince Philip himself, with his usual understated gravity, passed the honor to her during an emotional ceremony in July of 2020. The day had been subdued but meaningful, stripped of pomp yet rich with significance. Philip, already frail but still commanding, had handed Camilla the role with what many assumed was his full confidence in her. She accepted it with grace, her eyes betraying a mix of pride and humility. At that moment, it seemed certain that she would continue his legacy, a bridge between his steadfast service and the next generation's duty. For her, it symbolized belonging, a rare moment of being chosen not despite her history, but because of who she had become in the eyes of the man who valued duty above gossip. But fate, and Philip's private will, would have the final say. At his funeral in April 2021, Camilla walked with quiet dignity, wearing the regiment's bugle brooch as a deeply personal tribute. To the public, it appeared as though nothing had changed, as if the torch of the Rifles had been safely placed in her hands. Her grief was visible, but so too was her resolve, a woman determined to honor Philip's memory by continuing the service he had entrusted to her. She believed the role was hers to safeguard. Then the whispers came, discreet at first, and then impossible to ignore. That sacred trust she thought secure had, in fact, been reassigned. Catherine's name, written by Philip himself, emerged as his final choice to carry the title forward. For Camilla, the revelation struck with a quiet, devastating finality. It wasn't merely about being replaced, it was about realizing that in the depths of his heart, Philip had seen something in Catherine that even Camilla's years of service could not eclipse. Yet she bore the disappointment with the same composure that had defined her entrance into royal life. Those close to her could sense the hurt beneath her calm exterior, the quiet sting of being overlooked. But Camilla refused to let the private ache show. She had learned long ago that in the monarchy, dignity in defeat was just as important as grace in victory. Though she continued to serve, fulfilling her duties as queen consort and supporting the Rifles in other ways, there was no denying the shadow cast by Philip's decision. And still, in the silence of her own heart, she came to understand what many others could not, that the royal family was not a place of permanent certainties, but of shifting roles, chosen not out of sentiment but out of strategy and vision. Accepting this truth, Camilla stood tall, carrying her quiet sorrow with the kind of strength only years of hardship could teach. But for Catherine, this was never about rivalry. It was about honoring the quiet trust Philip placed in her. With grace and quiet resolve, Catherine began carrying the torch and Philip's memory into a new era. There was no grand announcement, no public fanfare when she stepped into the role he had left for her. Instead, there was a quiet flurry of meetings behind palace walls, where Catherine sat with trusted advisors, listening more than speaking, her focus unwavering. Plans were drafted not just for ceremonies and photographs, but for real impact for youth initiatives that echoed Philip's deepest convictions, and for military visits that would breathe new life into the traditions he cherished. Every detail mattered to her, because she knew this was more than a title. It was a promise to fulfill the vision of the man who had chosen her above all others. Her connection to young people became the cornerstone of her work, seamlessly tying her own passions to Philip's most enduring legacy. The Duke of Edinburgh Award had touched her life once as a teenager, instilling in her a resilience she carried through every chapter of her journey. Now, she stood on the other side, inspiring, guiding, and encouraging a new generation to test their limits and discover their own strength. When she visited schools and spoke to groups of young participants, she did it not as a distant royal figure, but as someone who understood what the program meant, someone who had lived it. It was a subtle yet powerful message that this wasn't charity, this was continuity. Those close to her recounted the moment she was told of Philip's request, a private, almost sacred memory. In a quiet room at Kensington Palace, the words were spoken softly, and yet they landed with the weight of a lifetime. Catherine, usually so composed, felt the tears gather despite herself. It was not pride she felt, but a profound sense of gratitude that Philip had seen her, truly seen her, for who she was and what she could carry forward. In that moment, the magnitude of his trust settled over her like a mantle she would never shrug off. William watched her with quiet admiration as she grew into the role. He knew better than anyone the pressures she bore, the relentless scrutiny, the weight of every misstep waiting to be amplified. Yet she handled it all with a calm that was neither forced nor fragile. To him, it was a revelation seeing his wife, once the shy girl he'd met at university, now standing with the kind of quiet authority that even Philip would have respected. Pride, love, and an unspoken understanding passed between them with every glance, a reminder that they were walking this path together, just as Philip and the Queen had done before them. Every action Catherine took seemed to reflect Philip's belief that true leadership didn't shout. It moved quietly, shaping lives, lifting others without demanding applause. She visited soldiers and families with warmth and sincerity, carried herself with dignity yet approachability, and never let the weight of her role overshadow the human connection that made it meaningful. But what does this mean for the future of the monarchy, and for the delicate balance between tradition and change? Beneath the grandeur of crowns lies a quiet weight, a legacy carried not in gold, but in grace. In the silent depths of Windsor, beyond the public's gaze, rests the royal vault, a place where monarchs and secretaries sleep side by side. These stone chambers have seen centuries of power and pain, triumphs and betrayals, love stories and feuds that shape the destiny of a nation. It is here, in this hallowed ground, that Prince Philip was laid to rest in April 2021, the final chapter of his extraordinary life written in stillness and stone. His burial was not just a ceremonial gesture, but a deeply symbolic union with Queen Elizabeth, the woman he had walked beside for over 70 years. Their coffins, placed side by side in the vault, became more than a testament to their marriage. They became a monument to the kind of love and loyalty that outlasts even the harshest storms. Together in death as they had been in life, they embodied the quiet dignity of a family that never shows all its cards, yet carries all its burdens. For those left behind, though, the story was far from over. Philip's final wishes, whispered in sealed documents and entrusted to a select few, became a sacred responsibility. They were not just instructions, but a map of his vision for the monarchy's future, a vision he had crafted with care, knowing the world would change whether the family liked it or not. The decision to name Catherine as the guardian of his most cherished role was more than personal preference. It was a deliberate act, a passing of the torch to someone he believed could uphold both the weight of tradition and the demands of a modern world. Catherine has carried that weight with remarkable balance. She moves seamlessly between royal banquets and children's charities, between solemn ceremonies and candid conversations. Every step she takes echoes the expectations of history while hinting at the promise of something new. In her, the monarchy has found a rare blend of respect for the old ways and a quiet insistence on progress. And yet, every choice she makes is shadowed by the unspoken rivalry with Camilla, a tension that has never fully dissipated since Philip's will surfaced. Camilla may not voice her feelings, but those close to the palace know she still wears the memory of that decision like an invisible scar. In public, she smiles and fulfills her duties, but there are moments fleeting, subtle when the strain between them hums just beneath the surface. The family may avoid addressing it, but the contrast between Catherine's rise and Camilla's quiet retreat is a story written into every encounter they share. This legacy, handed down not in gold but in expectation, has become Catherine's burden and her opportunity. The monarchy stands on the edge of transformation, teetering between the comfort of what has been and the uncertainty of what could be. And now, All eyes turn to Catherine because what she does next could redefine the royal family forever. One decisive moment, one quiet heart, and the course of royal history poised to change in her hands. Catherine now stands at a crossroads where the weight of the past collides with the urgency of the future. Around her, centuries of tradition loom, every gilded title and ancient vow pressing against her shoulders. Yet she holds something none before her quite possessed: the quiet power to recast the monarchy without shattering it. The path she chooses from here will not just define her reign as Princess of Wales, it could rewrite the very meaning of royalty in the modern age. Her influence already radiates far beyond palace walls. In William, she has nurtured a calmer, more relatable air, a man who smiles more easily, speaks more honestly, and carries himself with the humanity his mother once showed the world. In their children, she plants the seeds of empathy and resilience, modeling for them a monarchy not based solely on duty, but on care and connection. And in the public, she inspires a delicate hope that the crown might, at last, feel closer to the people it serves. Every gesture, every carefully chosen word ripples outward, shaping how the family is perceived by millions who once questioned its relevance. But the balancing act is relentless. Camilla remains a quiet presence, and though the tension between them is never spoken aloud, it lingers in the air, a reminder that tradition does not easily step aside. Catherine knows she must honor what came before, even as she carves a new path. Too much change too quickly, and she risks alienating those who still revere the old ways. Too little, and the monarchy risks fading into irrelevance. It is this fine line between deference and daring that defines her every move now. And yet, she seems uniquely suited to it. Where others sought power through prominence, she wielded hers through patience. Where others demand loyalty, she earns it quietly, through kindness and consistency. Already, her way of leading, soft-spoken yet firm, traditional yet open-hearted, has begun to redefine royal service. It is no longer simply about ceremony or survival. Through her, it becomes a question of meaning, of how the monarchy can still matter in a world that grows more skeptical by the day. The stakes are higher than they've ever been. A single misstep could reopen old wounds between her and Camilla, between the family and the nation. But a single inspired decision could also unite them all, stitching together a narrative of renewal and hope. And so, the quiet revolution she carries is both fragile and unstoppable, dependent on her willingness to keep walking that thin line, to keep whispering where others have shouted, to lead not by conquering but by connecting. As Catherine steps forward, carrying Philip's quiet wish and the hopes of a nation, we watch a new chapter unfold where grace whispers louder than power ever could. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.